Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you're interested in and, well, really dig into them to pull out the most fascinating insights. Basically, your shortcut to getting up to speed.
Yeah, cutting through the noise.
Exactly. So today we're exploring the world of Pietro Ubaldi, specifically focusing on his work Prophecies, which you wanted us to look into.
Right. It's a really unique text.
It is. It's this mix of his own thoughts, his reading of history, and these, well, pretty significant predictions he made based on what he called spiritual laws and historical cycles.
Yeah, patterns he saw repeating.
So our mission here is to sort of unpack Ubaldi's whole way of thinking, past, present, future, and grab the most compelling bits for you to think about.
Sounds good. Where should we start? His life seems foundational.
Good point. Let's start there. Okay,
Yeah.
so Ubaldi had this idea about his own life, didn't he? These rhythms.
Yes, it's quite central to how he viewed things. He saw his life unfolding in these distinct 20-year periods, starting right from when he was 5 years old.
5. Wow. So not arbitrary milestones.
Not in his view. He believed they reflected something deeper. That first stretch, 5 to 25, he saw that as primarily physical formation,
Yeah.
building the vessel, so to speak.
Okay, the foundation, then.
Then, from 25 to 45, the focus shifted. Intellectual development, his early work, figuring things out.
Right, the mind catching up.
And the next phase, 45 to 65, that was key. He called it his inspirational period. His time in Sicily, and then that real burst of creativity and conceptual work back in Gubbio. A lot of his main ideas came then.
Gubbio, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where things really solidified. But it didn't stop there, did it? This rhythm idea carried on.
No, it absolutely continued. And this leads us to what he saw as the fourth and, well, final period, ages 65 to 85, kicking off around 1950.
And this one was different. It had this mission element.
Exactly. This period was massively significant for him because it started with what he felt was a direct divine instruction. Moved to Brazil. There was a specific mission waiting for him there.
So his personal life cycle suddenly intersects with this bigger purpose.
Precisely. He made the permanent move in 52, age 66. And he went with his total conviction that the 20-year pattern would define his work and destiny in Brazil.
And he even had a prediction about how that final cycle would end based on this rhythm.
He did, yes. Based on this 20-year clock, he predicted he'd finish his work, his mission, by 1971, and then he expected to pass away.
And that's documented, not just hearsay.
Oh, yes. It's in interviews. It's discussed in his book, Pietro Ubaldi e o Tercero Millennio. For him, it was a clear timeline, tied directly to these phases.
So just to quickly recap his view, body, then mind, then the big ideas in Gubbio between 31 and 51, and finally putting it all into practice, the mission in Brazil, 51 to 71.
That's the gist of it. It's like his own life was a template for development.
And what's really striking is that he didn't see this mission as just his own idea, right? He felt guided.
Very much so. Ubaldi was absolutely convinced there was a guiding intelligence behind it all. He talked about pre-warnings he received, how events just seemed to line up perfectly, even against the odds.
Things just falling into place.
Yes, and the fact that his efforts succeeded despite significant obstacles. For him, that these weren't coincidences.
So not just good luck, then.
Definitely not. He argued that these consistent, intelligent effects, as he put it, they had to have an intelligent cause beyond just the physical world. He pointed to spiritual forces, ultimately, God's will.
Interesting. And even negative things, challenges, they fit into this.
That's right. He had this perspective that even forces that seemed, well, malevolent or obstructive were actually, in the grand scheme, serving the ultimate purpose of good.
A way of finding meaning even in adversity.
It framed his whole understanding of his journey.
Okay, let's zoom in on Brazil then. That divine call in 1950, that must have been a profound moment.
It was the absolute catalyst for this final chapter. And the way the move actually happened, well, it seemed almost miraculous to him.
Like the passport issues.
Exactly. Problems in Genoa just dissolving, clearing the path right when needed. Things like that really cemented his belief that he wasn't acting alone.
And didn't he mention something during the sea voyage itself? A voice?
He did. A very personal moment where he felt he heard, "I myself will guide the ship." Powerful stuff, showing his deep faith.
But arriving, of course, reality hits. New country, new mission. It wasn't smooth sailing initially.
Oh, definitely not. He faced major challenges. Learning Portuguese was a big one, obviously, and supporting his family in a totally new context. These were practical, everyday struggles.
And then there was the issue of how people received his mission, some trying to use it.
Yes, that was a significant problem early on. People trying to twist his work for their own agendas, personal gain. That deeply troubled him.
He was quite firm about that, wasn't he? Keeping it purely spiritual.
Absolutely. He pushed back hard against any attempts to co-opt his message for material interests. The integrity of the mission was paramount.
And his method for dealing with opposition was different, non-resistance.
Yes, he consciously adopted that principle from the gospel. Not fighting back directly, but trusting that good would prevail through a kind of spiritual resilience.
It's quite a counterintuitive approach.
It is. He genuinely believed Christ was guiding events in Brazil to ensure the mission succeeded. He saw the struggles almost as a test, proving the power of God's will over human obstacles.
He even said something like, Christ advances, Christ wins.
No one can interrupt his triumphal march here in Brazil.
Yes, a very bold statement of his conviction.
It really shows his unwavering faith. Now, linked to this, he also saw himself as, well, sensitive, like an instrument.
Yes, very much so. He viewed himself as highly attuned, almost like a delicate instrument, deeply affected by his surroundings, like a receiver picking up signals.
He used analogies, right? Clocks, radios.
He did. Comparing himself to a precision clock or a sensitive radio. The idea was that just like those need specific, stable conditions to work right, he needed a certain kind of harmony, internal and external, for his inspired work.
So disturbances could really throw him off.
Absolutely. He felt external shocks, amplified by his hypersensitivity, could mess with his creative output, like static on the radio disrupting the transmission. And he definitely felt that kind of static when he got to Brazil. He called it a tempest.
He did. He described that initial period as very turbulent. And this turbulence, in his view, actually forced his work to change direction slightly.
How so?
It led to what he termed his five obra, a second body of work. The style was different, more practical, more direct, kind of adapted to the realities he was facing.
But he still felt protected, didn't he? That the core work wasn't totally stopped.
Exactly. Divine protection, in his eyes, prevented it from being completely derailed, which brings us back to that idea of non-resistance.
Right. He saw it as a powerful weapon, but one most people don't really get or use effectively.
Precisely. He thought it operated on a higher plane, a spiritual level that the practical material world often misses.
The paradox of winning without fighting in the usual way.
Yes. Achieving victory without conventional weapons. He felt forgiveness and love were ultimately stronger than aggression. He even planned to delve deeper into this in his work, A Grande Battaglia.
It's a challenging idea. Shifting gears a bit, let's look at how he saw history itself. It wasn't just random chaos for him.
Not at all. Ubaldi proposed this concept of a guiding intelligence, almost a thought of history, operating above individual human plans.
So events follow a logic, even if we don't see it.
That was his belief, a superior will driving a grand plan. He talked about a historical wave, like a current carrying things along. Individuals often become instruments in this, sometimes without even knowing it.
Which could explain why things seem contradictory sometimes, or why revolutions don't always turn out as planned.
Exactly. He saw the clash between individual selfishness and this larger historical plan as the source of much confusion and apparent illogicality. He'd point to revolutions ending in tyranny or the Russian Revolution's path as examples of deeper, almost biological drives hiding behind ideologies.
He wasn't too impressed by political flags and slogans then?
He saw them as somewhat superficial, often masking the more basic law of the victor that he felt dominated our current evolutionary stage. He contrasted this sort of messy, conflict-driven, biological plane with a higher organic plane of cooperation guided by the law.
So two tracks running in parallel, human effort and divine guidance.
In essence, yes. Humanity struggling and learning, often messily, while this higher intelligence consistently steers things towards good.
And within that, upheavals, wars, revolutions, what he called storms, they had a necessary function.
He saw them as the dynamic element, necessary for renewal. Peace is for consolidation, he thought, but the storms break down the old and allow the new to grow.
A cycle of destruction and creation. He even connected life and death, love and revolution.
Yes, all as expressions of this renewing power. Periodic upheaval was essential for evolution, in his view. Even suffering and sacrifice held creative potential. He'd often use Christ's sacrifice as the prime example, great good coming from apparent loss.
So, turning to his assessment of the world then, how did he see things? What was the state of civilization?
He perceived the civilized world as being in a kind of spiritual decline. He felt there was a lack of true intellectual depth. Too much focus on form over substance. A bit hollowed out, perhaps.
And the historical wave he saw dominating was destructionism. What did he mean?
He saw it as a necessary phase, tearing down old, worn-out structures politically, socially, even spiritually, to clear the ground for new foundations.
And who would do the tearing down versus the rebuilding?
Interestingly, he suggested that less evolved peoples or forces might be the instruments of this destruction, while the reconstruction would fall to those operating from different higher principles.
Hmm. He acknowledged technological progress, but with reservations.
Yes, he saw its value, but also noted a shift from individual struggle towards more social integration, and the paradox that technology's destructive power might actually force an end to war, making it unthinkable. It was all part of this larger cycle of decline and renewal he saw.
Okay, this leads us to a really specific part of his vision, Brazil's role. He was incredibly positive about Brazil's future.
He really was. He saw Brazil as uniquely positioned. Young, vast resources, relatively peaceful. He contrasted it strongly with what he viewed as an aging, stagnant Europe and a more belligerent Russia.
He even thought people would move there from Europe.
On a large scale, yes.
Yeah.
He highlighted Brazil's potential for racial amalgamation, its inherent openness, hospitality, its fundamental goodness. He felt it represented the sentiment, the heart of humanity.
The heart, as opposed to
Europe, which he saw as sophisticated, yes, but also more materialistic, cynical, individualistic. He felt traditional faith was waning there, pointing to Italy's materialism as an example.
Whereas Brazil had this inherent religiosity.
Exactly. He saw that deep spiritual undercurrent as fertile soil for a spiritual rebirth. He really believed Brazil could be the cradle of the next great civilization, the civilization of the spirit, of the gospel, for the third millennium.
A huge claim, a huge vision for Brazil.
Absolutely.
And then, building on this, comes his apocalyptic vision. We need to be careful with that word, right? Not fire and brimstone, necessarily.
Right. For Ubaldi, the apocalypse wasn't the literal end of the physical world. It was a period of massive transformation, a cosmic level sorting out, a struggle between good and evil playing out on a grand scale.
And he saw it as somewhat inevitable, predetermined.
On that grand historical level, yes. He felt events were guided by divine law, making the overall outcome predictable, even if individuals retained free will within that framework. It was a necessary cleansing, leading to the kingdom of God on earth, as he put it.
A renewal. And he even interpreted specific symbols from Revelation, the horsemen.
He did, tying them quite directly to the major powers of his time. The white horse as British imperialism, red as Soviet Russia, black as Germany, pale as the United States. It's a very time-specific interpretation, of course.
But the outcome was never in doubt for him.
No. The ultimate victory of good was certain. He saw a connection between the gospel's call to love and the apocalypse's, well, imposition of the law, sometimes forcefully. Two ways to reach the same goal of divine justice.
He talked about the fullness of time being reached, too, like a tipping point.
Yes, a point where direct intervention by higher forces becomes necessary. And he mentioned the second death, not physical death, but a definitive spiritual end for souls who completely resist evolution, who choose darkness.
Did he connect this to other prophecies?
Briefly, yes. He saw echoes in prophecies like those of Anna Katerina Emmerich or La Salette, suggesting a broader consensus about a coming period of trial followed by renewal. He even referenced things like the Great Pyramid, pointing towards 2001, and Daniel's prophecy of the stone destroying the statue, symbolizing Christ's victory.
So he saw different traditions pointing toward the same fundamental shifts.
Essentially, yes, a convergence towards an era of justice.
So as he neared the end of his own foreseen timeline, Ubaldi was very conscious of living in transformative times.
Deeply conscious, aware of the potential for direct divine intervention. He saw his era as one of self-destruction leading into reconstruction, feeling strongly that the fullness of time was arriving in the late 20th century.
And then there's that incredible message he received, psychographed from Francisco, likely Francisco Candido Xavier.
That's the general understanding, yes. Sent in 1951. It's quite something.
It really is. It speaks of humility, service. The task transcends the quadro of our comprehension. Let us not demand clarifications. Let us seek to serve. Just powerful words.
It is up to us only to obey until his glory is enthroned forever in the scourged soul of the world. It acknowledges the difficulty, the bitter path, but affirms the final victory.
And it ends on such note of hope, despite the darkness. Christ reigns, and tomorrow we will contemplate the celestial awakening.
It perfectly encapsulates his own faith. And then, of course, Ubaldi's own conviction that he would complete his work by 1971, which aligns with this whole framework.
Right. So wrapping this up, Ubaldi's Prophecies gives us the sweeping view from his own life cycles to global history, Brazil's destiny, and this apocalyptic transformation.
Key ideas being those cycles, the guiding intelligence, Brazil's special role, and this ultimate shift towards a spiritual age.
It's a unique blend, isn't it? Personal story, history, prophecy, all woven together.
Very much rooted in his own intense experiences and convictions.
Absolutely. So the final thought for you, our listener, is this. Looking at Ubaldi's framework, his predictions, what resonates today? Do you see aspects of our current world reflected in his vision? And what does his perspective offer, if anything, for navigating where we are now and where we might be headed?
Definitely food for thought.
Indeed. There's a lot more in Ubaldi's writings if you want to explore further. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.